Dear class, welcome to International Relations Lectures. We're looking at Neorealism, Liberalism, and Constructivism. This is Sophia Barkett. To start with, let's look at what Mingst and McKibben are saying about Neorealism. So basically, it's a reinterpretation of realism. That's what they're saying. Previously, you studied that realism proposes that states are the main actors, that conflict arises due to balance of power issues, right? So either states try to balance power and therefore they go into war, or states perceive that there is an imbalance of power. Okay, so in Neorealism, the main scholar is Kenneth Waltz, and he proposes that states act in response to power distribution in the international system, again, balance of power question, which gives rise to a particular structure. So the distribution of power gives rise to structure. So he's giving a kind of formal description to this whole balance of power question. He's saying there's a structure to the international system, which is basically based on the power distribution. And this results in polarity. So you have particular concentration of power, in particular regions. So these regions where you see the maximum power distribution, that's called these are basically the superpowers. Polarity and peace. So polarity, according to Waltz, is all about power distribution among superpowers, right? So realists basically disagree on what to do with polarity. Some say that when the international system is unipolar, this is the best. So you have one superpower, it's a hegemonic system, right? Others say that bipolarity is best, but we looked at what happened during the Cold War. We saw that there are many proxy wars happening. You see a weapons race, almost mutually assured destruction type situation, right? So it's not necessarily the safest. If you look at Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, you guys looked at the Melian dialogue. It also shows that the bipolar world is not necessarily the most peaceful. So one thing we learned at the end of the section on realism is that realism isn't one thing. There are different kinds of theories within realism, the different assumptions that each scholar had. And of course, there are problems even within the assumptions that we say that the scholars have. So look at Mingst and McKibben, page 77. You have the key actors. Most agree that states are the most powerful and matter the most, right? So characteristics of individuals. Some scholars, other than Waltz, are interested in human nature and they look at this kind of stuff. And they say that, they're to a varying degree, they vary on the level of negativity or the pessimism about human nature, basically. Hobbes would say that most humans are risk averse. They're not power seeking, but some are, and this is why you have civil war. And others are similar to Hobbes. But many assume that humans by and large are power seeking. Okay. So characteristics of states. States are supposed to mirror the kind of behaviors of individuals. They are treated like individuals, and that's why we say they're unitary actors. We don't look inside the state. This is a very neo-realist perspective. Okay, so states are considered to be unitary actors in the sense that they act as one single unit. When we talk about states, we don't say, oh, the president said one thing, the Congress said the other, and the judicial system, they, weighed in on this issue as well. We just say, what did the US say? What is the US doing? So when we talk about states, we don't look at the domestic politics. We also assume that states are rational. Okay, here's where all the fun stuff begins. In the quiz, many of you actually said that states are not rational, and that's very interesting. I wonder to what extent the decision is based on the fact that states actually go to war. They're considered power seeking, selfish, insecure, but at the same time, we assume that they're rational for some reason. So that's a good point. Many of you said, I don't know, the states are rational, or you said states are not rational because they seemingly start fighting like little children all the time, right? We also assume they acted in the national interest to protect territory and sovereignty. But if you look at the activities of states, one would actually worry if this is in fact true. Are they rational? Are they actually working in their national interest? These are good questions. Characteristics of international system. So again, most of them say that the international system is anarchic, which means there is no world government. However, once you put in the United Nations, the League of Nations, you see there is a kind of world government, and it is also judging states. So that's interesting that we still, realists still think there is some kind of anarchy in the world. So let's look at realists and neorealist beliefs about change. So some of them apparently believe in the possibility of perpetual peace. Okay, the emphasis has shifted to managing the frequency and intensity of war. So there's a belief that there's actually going to be war all the time. If you look at the history of Europe as we did in class, we saw that time-lapse thing where, basically you looked at the development of empires and nations in Europe, and you saw that there's some wars happening. Borders are changing. The names of states are changing. They're growing larger. Again, some of them are breaking apart. We saw Germany appear, reappear, but, always sort of vanishing, becoming part of the Holy Roman Empire. We saw the development of Kievan Rus, into Russia, and then later into the USSR. We saw the development of Spain. We saw the development of Portugal and France. So Italy also emerges like Germany. From city-states, it emerges into one large state. So we see the constant change factor in international relations, especially if you look at European politics. But also if you look at other parts of the world, you'll see that there is change. So the question then is of, what frequency of war and intensity of war are we likely to see? So we learned earlier that the major theorists are Thucydides, Thomas Hobbes, Morgenthau, Walls, Gilpin, and Mearsheimer. We didn't get a chance to look at Mearsheimer, Gilpin, and Morgenthau in much depth, but we looked at some of the others. Let's stop here and then continue in another part.